Rosie doesn't like that I'm shouting into the camera. I'm shouting. What's that? The yukuku. Yeah, you are. Good girl.
Hello, and welcome back to LizCapism. I'm Liz, and in this video, I will be making a mock-up for one of the dresses featured in the book Medieval Garments Revealed. This intro was supposed to be recorded with me talking to the camera, but there was this going on for a portion of the morning. So we'll be sparing you that, and doing a voiceover instead. In case you haven't heard of it before, here's a brief summary of Herjolfsnes. It was a Viking settlement in Greenland, which was excavated in the 1920s, including a large burial site. Through an amalgam of perfect conditions, this burial site had preserved several whole garments, including dresses, hoods, and some accessories. As countless dress historians will tell you, historic clothing is extremely hard to come by, as it degrades and decomposes really easily over time. So in the summary of the findings, outlined in the book Woven into the Earth, they pay special attention to the kinds of fibers, dyeing, weaving, and sewing techniques these people used to make their garments, with almost unprecedented original reference materials. A companion book was written by the same authors for the use of reconstructionists and reenactors, which graphed the existing garments as accurately as possible and outlined the general method of assembling the clothing. You may have seen Morgan Donner's video outlining this process. Link in the description. This is my first time actually scaling a pattern from a book, and that was its own challenge. But I didn't record any of the original scaling up footage. Mostly because I did that part late at night and there was a lot of cursing and starting over. No one needs to see that. Later in the video, I have included some footage of my scaling up the sleeve, because the first attempt was such a disaster that it was easier to start again. I was lucky enough to have some graph paper tissue in my stash that is in metric, and therefore corresponded 1-to-1 with the book's graphs. I used the tissue paper to create the pattern pieces, then cut my first mock-up from quilting cotton. I then fitted the dress a little more, then cut out new pattern pieces out of the mock-up to transfer to my fancy new sewable tracing paper. This is my first time using this material. The idea is to transfer your pattern pieces to this sturdier material so you can sew it into its own mock-up, which can then be unpicked and used as pattern pieces forever. In an attempt to demonstrate just how fiddly and long this process was, I have kept most of the tracing, cutting, and assembly footage. Most of it is sped up to between 2,000 and 3,000%, condensing hours of footage into about a half hour. I hope that this will be encouraging to anyone who feels like they are too slow or take too long, especially with a new technique. This is not only my first scaling up, but also my first attempt at pre-Renaissance clothing. There's a first time for everything. As with anything new, it's gonna go slow at first, so let's learn this one together. The first mock-up was cut out using leftovers from my mock-up of the walkaway dress, and so I had to do a lot of piecing and didn't pay much attention to length. It was the shape of the top portion that was important for this first fitting. I did a bunch of checks on the dress form to make sure that the pieces assembled the way they were supposed to before I sewed. It looked good, so I went for it. The assembly isn't difficult. Couple shoulder seams, 6 relatively straight side seams, a couple of gussets, then the sleeves, eventually. It went pretty quickly once I had all the pieces cut out.
There we go. Focus on the face. Thank you. She's all cut out. I haven't bothered sewing this little lip on the front and the back panels, only because I'm not sure if I want to keep it. There doesn't seem to be a lot of logic behind why it's cut the way that it is. I'm gonna have to do a little bit more reading, see if there's any information in the book about why, but in the meantime, I'm not gonna fuss too much about how these all fit together. I also haven't cut the sleeves yet, partially because it was gonna be harder to get on the mannequin, but also because having followed the pattern, it looks like it's the right shape, but I think it's too small, especially for the arm size. So I don't know if that was a problem with my measurements or if that was a problem with...
Yes, it was my bad measurements. No need to finish this thought, Liz. In the next segment, you will see me completely redraw the sleeve from the book.
I actually like the fit okay. It's surprisingly shaped considering that it's just large chunky pieces that have been put together. So there's 2 side panels on either side, the back piece, the front piece, and then in the front and back there are also 2 gore pieces that are put into the front to kind of add a little bit of flair. But I really do like the shape. I think on the whole she does look really nice. I think it's just a little bit baggy still. Like I've still got quite a lot of room in there, and while that's obviously this was meant to be a garment that had a loose fit, and I don't want it to be too fitted because I want to be able to get in and out of it, I just want to see if I can take everything in just the tiniest little bit. So like I might take it in a little bit more up here and then kind of leave the skirts to swish out a little bit more. Maybe just like a 1/4 of an inch on each of the seams. I might try that and see how that goes, because I think that's... At that point, I definitely will have to try it on me instead of the mannequin. I don't think it's going to be easy to get on and off the mannequin once I make it much smaller. I think it's a good shape. Like honestly, this is as much as I could have hoped for out of this mock-up. It's got a good neckline. I was a little bit haphazard on the neckline, cutting it out just because I wanted to get it done fast. Sorry. Next steps, I'm going to take in each of the side seams, so 1, 2, 3 side seams on each side, and I'm going to take them in about a 1/4 of an inch for a total of 3/4 of an inch on each side. So I think that's plenty. Are you quite satisfied? Yes, hello. All right, I think I'm gonna get to work on making sure that this lady has got a slightly narrower top, and I think I'm gonna hand sew these. I don't think I want to get my machine involved in what is essentially the teeniest of little niggly bits, so I think I'll just hand sew that and see how it falls.
I did hand sew it. It was a pain, and my medieval sewing friends agreed not necessary to the integrity of the garment, so I skipped it in the second mock-up, as you will see.
And then I'll try it on, and we'll go from there.
I didn't take in the entire length of the seams, just up until my natural waist, where I joined back up with the original seam.
Okay. So here she is in all her twirly glory. Mind the jangling of the dog. I think definitely taking in the seams an extra 1/4 inch on each side has really helped. The edges here feel a little bit more form-fitting without compromising that look. Like, it is really still meant to look Viking-y. The shape, I think this is gonna get fixed. I promise. I'll hand sew it before I'm done the mock-up. I need to stop skipping steps on the mock-up, so we'll get that sorted. But in the meantime, it's tricky when you're trying to adapt something historical for everyday use. This is sort of the history bounder's dilemma, I guess. How accurate do I want to be? How consistent do I want to be with the original shape? And how much do I want it to be evocative of that shape and of that style? Because if I form fit it too much, then it's more like a contemporary sundress, and that's not awful. It's not a bad idea. It's just, is that what I want to go for? Do I want to stay more consistent in this sort of historical style, Or do I want to be a little bit more modern? Does it matter? Honestly, I've worn stranger things out of the house than a slightly loose sundress. So frankly, I don't think it matters that much. And I do like the fit, and this sort of reduces my need to do much to the original pattern. I'm really surprised, honestly, because I was afraid it was going to look a bit like a potato sack. I still do have to add the sleeves, so that's the next step, but I wanted the fit to be right here because the arm size, obviously, are going to change size if I'm changing the side seams. Now to make the sleeves. Alright. I'm scared. This is the part that Do I want sleeves? Yes, I want sleeves, Liz. Shut up.
Okay, so I rescind all of my sleeve anxiety. Once I had gotten the right shape for the sleeve and the armpit gusset, it was easy as pie to assemble. Getting the right sleeve shape meant completely redrawing it. I compared the book with my original drawing, and it was so off, I don't even know how I managed it. Not to worry, just more proof that while mistakes may cost time, fixing them solves more problems down the line. It was totally worth it. Also, I realized that you can scan the page and enlarge it for printing, but that would be its own breed of troubleshooting with a printer that doesn't always behave, so I don't think I could have saved that much time for me this round. So now that I knew roughly how my shape compared to the original pattern pieces, I chalked all of my seam adjustments and cut them out. I could have just cut the seams without the chalk, but I was worried that I would accidentally cut the original seams and wind up with the same fit problems on the second mock-up. Also, please ignore the facing I added around the neckline. It turned out not to be necessary or helpful and added more bulk to seams that didn't need them. Because we are none of us robots, my formerly identical side pieces were slightly not symmetrical anymore. I averaged them out and found a happy medium for the recut pattern pieces. I also changed the top shape of the gores. It was horrible to hand sew, and while I am sure that a more accomplished seamstress could manage it, I have a suspicion that it would just look sloppy and bumpy when I tried it. So I opted for a slightly more efficient triangle point. And in case you ever wonder what's going on while I putter away for hours at the sewing machine, this is mostly what's happening.
He replaced her away in his cabin below. Let the wind blow high, blow low. She's so pretty and neat, she's so sweet and complete. She's sung captain and sailors to sleep, sleep, sleep. She sung captain and sailors to sleep. Then she rubbed them of silver, she rubbed them of gold, she rubbed them of costly ware. Oh, then took his broadsword instead of an oar, and paddled her way to the shore, shore, shore. And paddled her way to the shore.
I am not a trained singer, just an enthusiast. You needn't tell me I'm out of tune. Trust me, I know. It just makes me happy and makes dull tasks seem to go a little quicker. Sewing the sewable tracing paper was interesting. It can be torn easily with the wrong kind of pressure, but it surprised me how much the seams held up during the assembly process. Very little of the process was different from my first mock-up in terms of assembly, except I had enough fabric to use the whole length all the way around. All in all, I feel like it was a great learning experience. I like the shape and feel like this dress is definitely achievable. The next video in this series will be the construction of the final garment, probably in the next month or so, depending on how I get on. I don't know why I look so serious in these wide shots. I'm really pleased, I swear. In the meantime, check out some of my other videos, and if you like to stick around, please subscribe. Let me know in the comments below if you've ever tried scaling up a pattern, and if so, how'd you get on? Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.
Do you want a Herjolfsnes dress? I think you'd be spectacular.